What if the moment that made you feel alive again was the one that could destroy everything you built? This isn't just a love story. It's a story about loneliness in crowded rooms, about choosing safety over passion, until passion refuses to stay quiet. If you believe it's never too late to feel something real, then hit subscribe right now, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. She had always been the kind of woman people described with words like sensible, composed, reliable, the sort of woman who kept her promises, paid her bills on time, chose neutral colors, and never once did anything that could be considered reckless. At 42, Elena Morozova had built a life that looked stable from the outside. A tidy apartment overlooking the gray edge of the river, a managerial position in a publishing house, a circle of friends who admired her calm advice. But beneath that carefully structured routine lived a quiet, echoing emptiness she had long ago accepted as the natural cost of adulthood. Because after her divorce 10 years earlier she had convinced herself that passion was for the young and chaos was for the foolish, and she was neither. She avoided risks the way some people avoided fire, and yet on a rain-heavy Thursday evening, when she reluctantly agreed to attend a small art fundraiser hosted by her colleague, she had no idea that a single conversation would tilt the axis of her controlled world. He was standing near a wall covered in abstract canvases, sleeves rolled to reveal paint-streaked wrists, dark hair falling carelessly over curious eyes that held that dangerous brightness of someone who had not yet learned to fear consequences, and when he smiled at her it wasn't flirtation at first. It was recognition, as if he saw something in her that she had buried. His name was Mark. He was 26, a freelance muralist who spoke about cities as if they were living creatures and about mistakes as if they were necessary chapters rather than shameful secrets. And when he asked her what she loved, not what she did for work but what she loved, she found herself unable to answer, because she couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked. Their conversation stretched past polite minutes into reckless hours, and for the first time in years she forgot to check her phone, forgot to measure her words, forgot to calculate how she appeared, and when she finally stepped back into the cold night air she realized something had shifted inside her chest, something warm and frighteningly alive. She told herself it was harmless curiosity when she agreed to meet him for coffee the following week, and harmless curiosity again when coffee became a walk through narrow streets soaked in autumn light, and harmless curiosity once more when that walk ended with laughter that felt so genuine it startled her. But harmless curiosity does not make your pulse race when a message appears on your screen, nor does it make you stand in front of your wardrobe reconsidering colors you had once deemed too bold. And soon Elena found herself living in two parallel realities. One where she remained the dependable woman her friends knew, and another where she was rediscovering music she hadn't listened to in decades, tasting street food at midnight, and talking about dreams instead of deadlines. Mark didn't treat her like a fragile relic of a different generation, nor did he place her on a pedestal. He challenged her, teased her, asked why she always assumed the worst outcome before trying something new. And when she admitted that stability had become her shield against disappointment, he said quietly that sometimes shields become cages, and that sentence echoed long after he left. Whispers began, of course, because cities thrive on speculation. A colleague spotted them together near the river, one of her friends commented on the sudden brightness in her voice, and when her ex-husband unexpectedly dropped by to discuss paperwork and noticed the subtle change in her softer eyes, a hint of defiance. He warned her that young men seek novelty, not permanence, and she almost believed him, almost retreated back into the safety of routine. But then Mark showed up outside her building with nothing more than takeaway noodles and a story about a failed mural that had been painted over by city officials, and instead of bitterness he expressed gratitude for having tried, and she realized she had spent years avoiding even the possibility of failure. What frightened her most was not the age difference or the gossip but the intensity of feeling. Because with Mark she felt seen in a way she hadn't since her 20s, felt spontaneous and flawed and beautifully uncertain, and that aliveness was intoxicating. The turning point came on a weekend trip she almost cancelled, a short escape to the coast where the wind tore at their coats and the sea roared like a warning. They rented a small cabin with peeling paint and unreliable heating, and in that imperfect space they spoke about everything. His fear of becoming ordinary, her fear of becoming invisible, his dreams of painting across continents, her quiet regret of abandoning her own youthful ambition to write. And when he asked why she had stopped, she confessed that life had demanded practicality, that love had once disappointed her so deeply she chose predictability instead, and he listened without judgment, then told her that being alive meant risking heartbreak again. That night, wrapped in blankets and vulnerability, she allowed herself to believe that maybe this was not madness but rebirth. But rebirth rarely comes without consequence, and the consequences arrived swiftly. Mark received an offer to join an international art collective touring across Europe and possibly the United States, an opportunity too significant to ignore, and instead of celebrating freely she felt a cold wave of inevitability, because she knew what such freedom required: mobility, uncertainty, sacrifice, things she had carefully constructed her life to avoid. When he shared the news, eyes shining with excitement and fear, she forced a smile and said she was proud. Yet inside she battled the old instinct to withdraw before being left behind, and that instinct nearly won when a friend bluntly accused her of clinging to a fantasy that could never last, reminding her of their age gap as if it were a ticking clock. In the weeks that followed, tension coiled between them. She began questioning his plans, asking practical questions about finances and visas and long-term commitments, while he sensed her retreat and accused her gently of preparing for an ending that hadn't happened. And one evening their conversation escalated into the kind of argument neither had anticipated, words sharpened by fear rather than anger, until he asked her the question she had been avoiding: "If I stay, will you truly be happy knowing I gave up my dream?" And she could not answer immediately because love, she realized, is not possession but courage. That night she lay awake confronting the truth that she had mistaken safety for peace, and that perhaps feeling alive meant accepting the possibility of loss. The twist she never expected came not from him but from herself. Instead of demanding he choose her over the opportunity, she surprised them both by suggesting they redefine what together meant, by admitting she had once wanted to write and travel and had buried that desire under layers of responsibility, and that maybe this was not the end but an invitation to evolve. And though fear trembled in her voice, she proposed taking a leave from work, something she had never done, to accompany him for part of the journey while pursuing her own writing again. Mark stared at her as if witnessing a miracle, not because she was sacrificing but because she was choosing boldly, and in that moment she felt the final remnants of her old self crack open. Her colleagues reacted with disbelief, her ex-husband with smug skepticism, her friends with cautious concern, yet none of their voices could drown out the quiet certainty growing inside her. And as she packed a suitcase that held more than clothes, holding instead years of suppressed longing, she realized the greatest transformation was not falling in love with someone younger but falling back in love with her own unfinished self. The road ahead promised no guarantees, and indeed there were difficult days, cramped trains, creative disagreements, moments when exhaustion magnified insecurities, and one painful week when Mark considered accepting a solo residency in New York that would separate them for months, forcing Elena to confront jealousy she thought she had conquered. Yet instead of collapsing into old patterns she chose honesty, expressing fear without accusation, and he responded with reassurance without resentment. Months later, standing in a crowded gallery in London where one of his murals was unveiled, Elena listened as he credited her not as muse or inspiration but as partner in courage, someone who reminded him that growth is mutual, and she realized the story was no longer about age or scandal or even romance, but about reclamation. She had published her first collection of essays during their travels, raw reflections on risk and reinvention that resonated with readers who had long felt trapped in their own predictable lives, and letters poured in from women across continents thanking her for proving that transformation has no expiration date. The final twist, perhaps the most unexpected of all, was that their relationship did not remain a fairy tale untouched by reality. It evolved, weathered, matured, and though they faced moments of doubt and distance, the foundation built on choice rather than dependency endured. Years later, when asked what changed her life, Elena would not speak first of the young artist who disrupted her routine. Though she loved him deeply, she would say instead that one evening she allowed herself to answer a simple question: "What do you love?" and dared to seek the answer. Because sometimes feeling alive has less to do with who stands beside you and more to do with whether you were brave enough to step beyond the boundaries you once mistook for safety. And as she watched the sunset bleed into the horizon of yet another unfamiliar city, she understood that the woman who once feared adventure had not disappeared but transformed, and that being alive was never about age, approval, or guarantees, but about choosing, again and again, to live fully despite uncertainty. If this story stirred something inside you, if you've ever felt too late, too cautious, too afraid to begin again, remember that the line between safety and stagnation is thinner than we think, and sometimes all it takes to cross it is one honest conversation and the courage to believe you deserve to feel alive.